Sorry about that, everybody. That's what happens when you have pets. Sometimes they want to be the show instead. And unfortunately, Nala happened to land right on my keyboard. And my mouse is right over the connection. So unfortunately, she unlocked or hit the key, which lost my internet connection right in the middle of a great thought. Yeah, so unfortunately, like we were talking about before, the schedule stuff, and to Jeremy's point before about denying his thoughts. Obviously, I'm going to read people's thoughts, and because everybody has a voice, and but at the same time, I think that there's stuff that's being seen that isn't actually there. There's a it's difficult to create. It's difficult to create a series from where it's been struggling. Let's be honest. It's got a lot of stuff that needs to have work, but no matter what they do, there's always going to be people that do not like certain things about the schedule. They don't like certain things the way it's done. That's part of any sport. It will always be the case. In terms of snubbing smaller tracks, again, it's not a matter of, quote, snubbing. They've got what they feel is the procedures, the rules that they want to have in place. And if the terms aren't met, then they won't go to those places. At the end of the day, there aren't a lot of options left. That's part of the problem that we're at right now. So we can't get to a point where we don't have places to race because costs aren't what they need, or the series is too far away, the pay is not enough. You gotta remember, a lot of these costs for cars, for travel, for hotels, for food, for flights, it is not cheap. So unless there is solid corporate investments, solid return of investments, there is going to be a lot of struggles. Now we have to be honest here. We saw amazing growth this year. 60 different drivers participated in the 14 races that we did have. So clearly there is a lot of things there. Jeremy says, big difference between listening and fans and listening to money. Absolutely. Money talks. But you see it in every sport. You see it, the difference, again, between listening to fans. I think there's more than just our fan base, though. There's fan base in Quebec. There's a fan base out west. There's a fan base in Atlantic Canada. There is a fan base in Ontario. But yeah, you are going to listen to the money if the money isn't here. It's unfortunate. The series history is here. Could this all be temporary? Absolutely. I thought when we were going back in 2021, I thought we were going to go back to Flamborough a couple more years. Peterborough's a little bit different. Peterborough we haven't been back to since before NASCAR was involved. So that's a little bit different. Sauble, same thing. Like, I don't know whether they'd ever look at potentially going all the way out to Sauble. I'd like to see it because I think those cars are a lot of fun and that track's a lot of fun. Full throttle, just size-wise, it's not doable. And then outside of that, there's not a ton of other options. Grand Bend can't hold a race, unfortunately, due to the size for these cars. So, and then we've got Delaware, which could do a second race. Jukasa, which is unfortunately just, as we know, it is just kind of sitting there. And I think if they got an investor, then this series changes a little bit, because if you look at Jukasa all of a sudden coming back on the schedule, that could easily host 2 races. No problem. And my biggest attraction to potentially Jukasa, if they were to get an investor and get that track open again, the biggest attraction for me to that is that track has sat and it's got weather. It's been weathered on, which means it's going to be really racy. Pinty's continued the series time on life support by making announcement at Bristol. They had an opportunity, and in the name of the World Series, they took that opportunity and struck out. Absolutely. They made the announcement at Bristol. They had the champ go down there. Some decisions work and some they don't. I mean, at the end of the day, you're right on one side is that they do need that support. They need other racers from the U.S. to talk about the series. Continue to get eyes on it. But I think where we get lost a little bit sometimes is we try to state that we need the United States fans to pay attention to it. I think what we really need is the Canadian fans to pay attention to it. You need Canadian fans to get involved. You need the Canadian money to come in. Sure, we would love some of the American money too, but repping Canadian brands should be what this is about. I think a lot of things could be done. We don't know who's in charge. I mean, we haven't really heard much about their leadership team for this year, whether things are going to stay the same, whether they're different. Obviously, all that stuff is going to come out. I believe there's going to be a lot of driver movement. It would appear that there's going to be some major moves. But as you had mentioned before, the APC series is an Ontario-run series. Has a very good base in terms of home and has a good streaming partner here on GeForce TV. So I think a lot of that stuff can be worked out. It's a lot of it. The series is founded on the Canadian man's dollar. So stop talking about the Americans and refocus on Canadian grassroots racing. It's not rocket science. I would agree that we do need to refocus on Canadian grassroots racing, because where are the next Pinty Series drivers going to come from? Canadian grassroots racing. The hard part is trying to find a way to bring the costs way down, because right now, like you said, the Canadian man's dollar is not going to be able to afford Pinty's car, let alone rent it, without major support. So how do you do that, Jeremy? I mean, you say it's not rocket science, but you can't just change the costs. You have to cost the tires down. You have to get the cost of fuel down. You have to get the cost of traveling down. I think for myself, and I think what I'm getting the basis of your point is, keep it between two provinces. Ontario, Quebec. It's not a popular decision because they want it to be, NASCAR wants it to, I believe, at least they want this to be a countrywide series. But I think the countrywide aspect of it is slowly killing it. It is very taxing to put a lot of those funds on these teams to travel out west and to out east, while also coming back home and then working on the cars while all having regular day jobs. It is not an easy thing. That's for sure. At the end of the day, I believe there's going to be a lot of changes from off-season this year, and 2024 needs to be another momentous year. We can't go backwards. And I think we also have to think about this as well. As you mentioned, the DJ is not going to be here forever in this series. Scott Steckley, I can't imagine, is always going to be in this series. You also have names that have been in the series for a lot of years now. It's crazy to think that you're 10 years, you're going to have LP Dumoulin in this series. Andrew Ranger has well been over 10 years now. DJ, and then Marc-Antoine Cameron is now into his 40s. You have Alex Tagliani, I think he's about almost in his 50s now. He might be 48 potentially. So, how much longer is Tag going to keep going in this series as well? So you're going to need people to come in and replace them. Now, we've got some guys from Quebec, obviously, in JP Bergeron and Thomas Nouveau, but there are still a lot of rides that could be made. McCall and WMI making these chassis in Ontario, and they're being filtered, I guess you'd say, through the programs and make their way out to the smaller teams. You have a couple of rental programs that are taking place, and with that type of support, you can keep the series alive. However, as Jeremy pointed out earlier, it gets a little tricky when one of those names doesn't stick around. One of those teams were to close. I think that's what happened when we talked about what Dee talked about earlier in the stream, which was we had a lot of these big teams that had some big money behind them, but that money left and the teams closed and no one came in to replace them. So it's a very tough thing to deal with, but I think when they eventually release the schedule, we'll get an idea as to the direction that they're going. Obviously, you can have your opinion as to where things are going to go next year, where things are going to go in the future. I'm going to say, Jeremy, I was very similar with that opinion that it was, dead on arrival. It's very easy to just demand that they make changes and not and want stuff to be fixed. It's kind of hard to see it from the outside. When you start to see and interact with the series and absolutely watching it for 20 years, that's commendable. I think what needs to happen, though, for a lot of us is the approach needs to change. The way that businesses are approached, the way that it's sold, the way that it's presented, as you said, like marketing, absolutely. Commercials, social media, it's so prevalent. Brands that people know, that would be a big thing. It's hard to keep people invested if it's only around certain things that people know. Like if you don't know any of these partners, you don't know any of these racers because they're not everyday names. We talked about even having these cars out at Dundas Square, having a driver throw out the first pitch at a Jays game or drop the puck. We've seen that in Quebec, actually. We saw Marc-Antoine Cameron drop the puck, I believe, at a Laval Rocket game. I think it may have been Laval Rocket game. So there's stuff that can be done. It takes a lot of work. And, we're going through another change, right? Obviously, we had a change in the series director last year with Sherry Putnam and Doug Gonder coming in. I don't know the situation right now between the GM in NASCAR in Canada. I haven't heard anything about it. I don't know if everybody in charge is still there. As far as I know, the TV situation is still staying the same for next year. And then, of course, there's the always ever persistent rumors as to whether or not things are going to continue and whether they're not. Drivers coming in, new teams coming in, retirements, drivers leaving. I think if all the stuff that's been talked about actually does happen, it could potentially be one of the busiest off seasons we've ever seen in this series. And a lot of change happening at one time. That's kind of when we want to talk about the change that comes in, because as we know in the US, it is with NASCAR, off-season, silly season talk is big, and it's fun, it's interesting. So hopefully we can have some of that. I think if some of the stuff, like I said, if some of the stuff does happen in terms of schedules, in terms of drivers, changes taking place. It would be wild. It would be very, very interesting. Definitely, maybe a little controversial. I think there's a lot of drivers who I do not know where they are going to be driving next year. I think there's a couple that we know for sure are likely safe, that wouldn't go anywhere because it's their own team or their family team, or they're affiliated with a big partner. So let's start with DJ. As long as Castro's there, nothing's happening with DJ. And I don't think, as far as I know, that there is any change. So we'll start with DJ. Marc-Antoine Cameron with Paillet. I don't expect there to be any change there. Won the championship, finished second last year. Kevin Lacroix, family team. Napa, he should be good. Donald Tage, I don't expect any change really with him. Own team, he runs his partnerships out of it. I don't think there's any sort of change there. Where it gets a little tricky is the rest, because I don't know the situations right now for the youngest competitors. The champion from last year, Trayton Lapsevich, I would think he's going to have some opportunities to run elsewhere. He's a champion at 19 years old in the NASCAR Pinty Series. Kyle Steckley, I would think that there's opportunities for him. APC champion, even younger. So that's obviously where I would start with those two. Brandon Watson, I don't know what's going on with him. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of confidence that he is going to be returning. And then there comes the question marks like every year. Dave Jacobs Racing, we don't really know what's going up to them. Tag, I always wonder about Tag because he's so much older now. He's not a young driver anymore. Sam Fellows, I'd really like to know what's going to happen with Sam, whether they're going to do more. Rafael Lessard, somebody that only got a couple opportunities last year to race. The Stacys, don't know what's happening with them either. So there is so many questions. Somebody else who would be safe, obviously, is LP Dumoulin with WeatherTech. As long as WeatherTech's back, you don't see any sort of change there. But everyone else, really, it's kind of up in the air. We really don't know. Jim says, I think this year will tell a lot. As, again, I can't see what that says because of the emoticon right there. As I think it says as, I don't know, as count is up, so we will see. Hopefully, our full-time count was pretty good last year. Final count is great. It's the second highest we've ever had in the series history. And, some people go, oh, well, that was, CASCAR, we used to get 70, 80 cars. Okay, was that 30 years ago? So a little bit different, right? At the end of the day, there's a lot of changes going to happen. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to look into. More stuff that's going to come out. We'll obviously get to it week in and week out. I am sorry for the little delay that we had with the stream going out for a little bit, but we got in, we finished this. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to GeForce TV, Race Rivals Race Chat tomorrow. Definitely come on in and enjoy off-season racing talk with Adam Ross and Clinton Jeffrey. And then, of course, here on the Power Hour, we're here every Monday from 7 to 8 to 8 o'clock. And, definitely thank you guys for tuning in. Once again, Jeremy, as always, D, Brian Ellis, and Jim Haynes, as always. Appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up, and have yourselves a great night. And we definitely want to talk more about this. Lots more rumors to dive into, and we'll get to the bottom of some of them. But that's it for now. Have yourselves a great night and a great week, and we'll catch you all next week here on GeForce TV.